gonna appoint the public defender for you.
That's horse. You do whatever the you want.
Excuse me?
My name is Mr. Greenman. I'm the federal witness.
Behind the headlines of America's most notorious crimes lies a disturbing irony, the staggering entitlement of society's most violent offenders. In courtrooms across the country, individuals who showed zero regard for human life, who tortured, killed, and destroyed families without hesitation, have thrown explosive tantrums when they felt disrespected by judges or prosecutors. These outbursts reveal something profound about criminal psychology. The deeper the evil, the more adamantly its perpetrators demand dignity they never gave their victims. When cornered or exposed, their carefully constructed facades crumble, revealing the true face underneath. Ted Bundy.
Look at the people they struck. Room and the jury walks in. I'm not going through this, and you knew that, Your Honor. Sit down. You know how far you can push me.
Ted Bundy isn't just another serial killer from our parents' generation. He's someone who changed how we think about what a murderer looks like. While we often picture killers as obvious outcasts or clearly disturbed people, Bundy was the opposite. He was considered attractive, smart, and successful. He went to law school. He worked at a Eastside prevention hotline. He was, by all appearances, a normal guy living a normal life. Some people even pegged him for a good person. That's what made him so dangerous. Nobody knows exactly how many people he killed. He admitted to 30 murders before his execution, but investigators think the real number could be over 100. His murders happened across at least 7 states from 1974 to 1978. Though some experts think he might have started killing when he was still a teenager. Here's what made Bundy next-level terrifying. He didn't hunt in dark alleys or sketchy neighborhoods. He attacked in broad daylight, often in busy public places like college campuses or beaches. His whole strategy relied on looking trustworthy. He'd pretend to be injured, wearing a fake cast or using crutches, and ask women to help him carry something to his car. His victims weren't people who took unnecessary risks. They were often educated, independent women who were just trying to help someone who seemed to need it. The way he got caught was almost random. After escaping from jail twice in Colorado, twice, he ended up in Florida where he attacked multiple women at a Florida State University sorority house. A police officer named David Lee spotted him driving a stolen car erratically and pulled him over. They found stolen credit cards and burglary tools in the car. It was only later that they connected him to the sorority house murders and the killing of a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach. The really disturbing part, his behavior after getting caught. In custody, Bundy acted like he was the main character in a TV show. During interviews, he'd switch between being super charming and intellectual, like he was at a job interview instead of being questioned for murder.
You feel that everything will turn out all right, that you are innocent. Do you still feel that?
Yeah, more than ever.
He would flirt with female interviewers and court staff, maintaining eye contact and trying to control every conversation. Even while facing multiple murder charges, he'd smile and joke around like he was some kind of celebrity.
I'm not guilty. Does that include the time I stole a comic book when I was 5 years old?
In court, it got even weirder. He sometimes acted as his own lawyer, showing off his legal knowledge while playing to the cameras like he was in a movie. Women would actually show up to his trials as fans, and he'd acknowledge them with winks and smiles, all while being tried for brutal murders. He acted like he was completely innocent, just a normal guy fighting against false accusations, but sometimes the mask would slip. When certain witnesses testified against him, especially ex-girlfriends or women who'd rejected him, you'd see the real Bundy. His eyes would change, his voice would get harsh, and his questions would become aggressive. Take his famous 1980 courtroom outburst.
Look at the people they struck. Room and the jury walks in. I'm not going through this, and you knew that, Your Honor. Sit down. You know how far you can push me.
During his trial for murdering 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, he lost it in court, twice in one day. The mask of the charming law student cracked, revealing the rage underneath. The first time, he suddenly stood up and tried to leave the courtroom, forcing guards to grab him. But it was his second outburst that really showed who he really was.
You want to make a circus? You've got a circus, and you'll have a all rain on your parade, Jack. You'll see a thunderstorm. This will not be the packed little drama you will arrange. Bundy, and sit down.
What triggered him? The jury selection process. It had taken 2 weeks and 150 potential jurors to find people who might be somewhat unbiased, but Bundy knew most people had heard about his other murder convictions. When he realized he couldn't charm his way out of this one, he completely snapped. This was the same man who'd spent years convincing everyone he was just a normal, well-adjusted guy. In these moments, everyone saw the real Ted Bundy, not the fake persona he'd created, but the angry, controlling killer underneath. In his final years on death row, Bundy gave interviews to investigators and authors. The way he talked about his crimes was deeply unsettling. He'd discuss the murders like he was a crime expert analyzing someone else's case, not like he was talking about his own actions. He could switch between being totally normal and completely detached from reality. Dale Roy Greenman.
Hello, Your Honor.
State your name.
Mr. Greenman.
you tell me your name?
Roy Greenman.
This is Dale Roy Greenman, arrested in Orlando, Florida for theft. Compared to Ted Bundy, Greenman's crime is almost unnoticeable. He'd stolen a pack of cigarettes, a lighter, and a Gatorade from a 7-Eleven. You might think his hearing would be as uneventful as his crime, and yet he threw a tantrum as if the stakes had never been higher, charged with petty theft and given a $250 bond.
So, Mr. Greenman, you have prior history out of state, and so the state may enhance this offense to a felony based on your prior. So I can't do anything with your case today. I am gonna appoint the public defender for you.
That's horse. You do whatever the you want.
Excuse me?
My name's Mr. Greenman. I'm the federal witness.
This was his reaction. It's funny how he demands respect but offers zero. Well, it's not actually funny. Imagine being a judge and having to deal with these pieces of work on a daily basis.
Let's get a jam for hour long up. And figure out what you're
All right,
doing.
he can be removed once y'all get him out.
What people like Dale don't realize is, one of these outbursts can actually worsen your charges by a lot.
I'm gonna set his bond at $1,000.
Dale Roy Greenman's bond was increased 4 times and put in jail. He was released on recognizance 1 week later, meaning he signed a document promising he would appear in court at a set date. To no one's surprise, he didn't show up, so a warrant was issued for his arrest. Scott Nelson. Also in Florida, Scott Nelson unalived a nanny named Jennifer Fulford. According to prosecutors, Nelson forced his way into a Winter Park home in September 2017. He tied up 56-year-old Jennifer Lynn Fulford and put her in the trunk of her own car. Then, he used an ATM to steal $300 from her account. Investigators say Nelson stabbed Jennifer several times in a vacant lot outside Orlando. Due to the accusation that Nelson took her life to cover up a robbery, prosecutors filed for the death penalty in the case. Both times that he appeared in court, he was cold, remorseless.
The penal system in America is a spectacular failure. Nothing works. But everyone that drives by a prison, they glance at it real quick and keep driving. They may shudder, oh, that's it, oh God, and thank God I'm not there.
State Attorney Kelly Hicks also spoke about Nelson after dealing with his case. She was shocked at how narcissistic he appeared. He refused to see the unspeakable crime he'd committed, and he did not view Jennifer as a person. Instead, he cried for himself over and over again, cursing the U.S. for mistreating him.
He is a man who believes he's been mistreated by the system, by everybody in his life. Jennifer Fulford died because this maniac wanted to air his grievances to the world.
Yep, this guy wanted to get arrested so he could complain to a wider audience.
They turned me into an animal. I've been beaten. I've been chained to beds for days that are ripped. I've been locked in cells that are so stifling hot. I have flashbacks to this very day.
The jail, he says, turned him into an animal, but no animal takes a life for no reason. And no animal robs and kills, then complains about the cell conditions.
I've had cockroaches running over my body. I've been beaten. I've been raped. I've been everything in prison.
Yet you did something that will potentially put you in prison for the rest of your life or on death row.
I couldn't help it.
So it was all about the money then. All about the money.
Isn't everything?
Wow, I'm speechless. Things got even more callous after a fellow inmate testified that Nelson had problems with Muslim inmates. That's when he flew off the handle.
Mr. Nelson, are we clear that you're going to stop talking? I need a verbal affirmative. Yes. Talk with your attorneys, and then your attorneys. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson.
Scott Nelson took a moment to relax, then spoke to his attorney. His conclusion, he wanted the death penalty, but even now he didn't get what he wanted. He was sentenced to life without parole.
I really think there were 2 goals. One, to get locked up, and the second goal was just to have a moment where people have to listen to him.
Yeah, well, and he also wanted to blame the world, right? I think that was his mission.
Imagine the type of person he was, where everyone he knew or loved could not listen to him anymore. That's what he felt he needed to do in order to force a bunch of new people to listen to him rant. The world will be a better place with this monster off the streets. Antonio Rosales. And here's Antonio Rosales, also in Florida. This horrible human being was charged with kidnapping, attempted murder, and SA of a 10-year-old girl. He quite literally dragged her off the street and drove her into the woods, where he committed unspeakable crimes against her. He wanted to take her life too. Just like Scott Nelson, he didn't want any witnesses. Luckily, the girl escaped and lived to tell the tale. Once arrested, Antonio Rosales was uncovered as a drifter with a very violent past. He appeared in court along with a translator, and things got out of hand pretty fast. The court documents would show the outrageous reason for Rosales' outburst. Apparently, he was insulted after being called a child molester. There's a bitter irony in how some of society's most violent offenders demand a level of dignity they never afforded their victims. Men who have committed unspeakable acts of violence, who have ended lives without hesitation or destroyed childhoods without remorse, will suddenly become indignant in courtrooms when they feel disrespected. It's a startling display of psychological compartmentalization. You see it in their outbursts. The more directly they're confronted with the reality of their actions, the more aggressively they reject it, often through displays of childlike petulance that would be almost comical if the context weren't so tragic. Each tantrum serves as a stark reminder of their profound disconnect from the gravity of their own actions. Rosales kicked and screamed until he was dragged out of the courtroom by multiple armed guards. As always, this behavior did not pan out in his favor. The following day, he was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 3 life sentences. Charles Manson. Charles Manson never actually killed anyone with his own hands, and that's what makes his story even more disturbing. Instead, he created something far more dangerous, a cult of devoted followers who would cull for him without question. Manson wasn't just a murderer, he was someone who could get inside people's heads and turn them into murderers. Growing up, Manson spent most of his early life in and out of juvenile detention centers and prisons, but when he got out in 1967, he landed in San Francisco during the peak of the hippie movement. He saw an opportunity, thousands of young people searching for meaning, many from good families who were rejecting traditional society. Manson, then in his mid-30s, positioned himself as a guru and spiritual leader. The group he formed became known as the Manson family. Most of his followers were young women from middle-class backgrounds, though he attracted some men too. They lived together in Spawn Ranch, an abandoned movie set outside Los Angeles. This is where Manson's true manipulation began. He used a combination of LSD, sleep deprivation, isolation, and constant preaching about an upcoming race war he called Helter Skelter, named after the Beatles song, to break down his followers' sense of reality. What made Manson particularly dangerous was his ability to convince others that murder was not only justified, but necessary. He told his followers that they needed to start this race war by committing murders that would be blamed on Black Americans. The violence would then spread, and in the chaos, Manson claimed, his family would emerge as leaders of the new world. The murders that followed were brutal. On August 9th, 1969, Manson sent 4 of his followers to a house in Beverly Hills. Their target was anyone they found there, but the main victim was Sharon Tate, a pregnant actress married to director Roman Polanski. Tate and 4 others were unalived in increasingly violent ways. The next night, Manson's followers killed Leno and Rosemary LaBianca in their home, writing messages in blood on the walls. What's crucial to understand is that Manson wasn't physically present for these murders. He sent his followers to do it, people who, months earlier, had been regular members of society. Somehow he was able to reshape these people's entire moral framework. When police finally caught up with the family, Manson's behavior became even more disturbing. In custody, and during his trial, he didn't act like someone trying to prove his innocence. Instead, he seemed to enjoy the attention, turning every court appearance and interview into a performance.
Do you feel blame? Are you mad? Do you feel like
He would make rambling speeches about society, stare intensely at witnesses to intimidate them, and break into random songs in the middle of questioning.
I wouldn't do anything that I felt guilty about.
You don't feel guilty at all?
There's no need to feel guilty. I haven't done anything I'm ashamed of.
His interviews became infamous. Manson would shift between seeming completely rational to suddenly erupting in threatening rants. He'd go from speaking quietly about love and environmentalism to screaming about murder and chaos. What made these interviews so unsettling was how quickly he could switch between these personalities.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
During his trial, Manson worked hard to maintain control over his followers, even from jail. He and his female followers would often break into songs in court, interrupting proceedings. They shaved their heads when he did. The really chilling part about Manson was that he never showed real remorse. In fact, in interviews spanning decades after his conviction, he often seemed proud of what he'd done. He'd speak about the murders as if they were some kind of revolutionary act, not brutal killings of innocent people.
Maybe I should have killed 400 or 500 people, then I would have felt better. Then when I felt like I really offered society something.
When asked directly about the deaths, he'd often respond with philosophical ramblings or threatening outbursts, never taking direct responsibility, but never exactly denying his role either. During his 1970 trial, Manson repeatedly interrupted proceedings with outbursts, including lunging at the judge with a pencil. This behavior continued until his death in prison in 2017. Even decades after the murders, he could still switch between being eerily charming and explosively threatening, showing that his act wasn't really an act at all. It was who he truly was. Hey, thanks for watching. Do you know other famous courtroom outbursts? What punishment should this behavior add for a defendant? Leave a comment down below and make sure you like and subscribe before you go. All right, catch you soon.